Welcome back. Glad to have you here. Tonight, an ancient institution will place humanity inside the deadliest environment it has ever engineered, only to discover that survival means something very different to those born on Earth. Let the story begin. The first mountain collapsed 12 minutes ahead of schedule. From the observation chamber of the Crucible Authority, Arbiter Soreth watched 8 million tons of black stone slide into the valley below. The impact struck with enough force to shake the orbital station suspended nearly 400 kilometers overhead. Dust rose in a wall 30 kilometers wide, swallowing the simulated dawn and turning the atmosphere the color of iron. At the center of the valley stood the human camp. It consisted of 6 modular shelters, 3 cargo platforms, a compact fusion generator, and a silver communications mast that had been deliberately disconnected from every external network. Around it waited 24 humans, selected by the Terran Union to represent their species in the most prestigious survival trial in known space. The avalanche buried half the camp. A shelter vanished beneath the descending rock. 2 cargo platforms were thrown against a ridge. The communications mast folded like wet grass. Soreth leaned forward in his suspension cradle. The membranes along his narrow shoulders tightened with satisfaction. "Begin casualty projections," he ordered. The Crucible intelligence answered at once. Based on prior species performance, total incapacitation is expected within 19 standard hours. Probability of surrender before the second environmental cycle is 78%. Around the circular chamber, representatives from 31 civilizations recorded the prediction. Their translucent displays glowed through the dimness. Some appeared solemn, others seemed almost relieved. Humanity had become a difficult subject in galactic diplomacy. The species had entered interstellar society only 43 years earlier, yet human vessels already crossed 1,200 inhabited systems. Human engineers repaired stations no one else would approach. Human settlers had established colonies on planets previously classified as marginal, unstable, or economically irrational. Their diplomats were polite, their military disciplined, and their traders persistent. The Crucible Authority had therefore issued a challenge. No species could claim full standing within the conquered of civilizations until it had demonstrated survival competence under controlled conditions. The trial had existed for nearly 6,000 years. It was not warfare, it was not punishment, it was, according to the Authority, a perfect measurement of evolutionary worth. Soreth had overseen 187 trials. He had watched desert species freeze. He had watched aquatic species dehydrate. He had watched hive organisms collapse when isolated from their queens. The Crucible exposed the hidden dependency beneath every civilization and forced that civilization to confront the truth of its own limitations. Humans, Soreth believed, would be no different. On the largest display, the dust began to clear. One of the buried shelters had been crushed almost flat. Human figures moved through the debris, their bright survival suits visible against the dark stone. Soreth expected panic, frantic medical signals, or the ritualized calls for extraction common to newly tested species. Instead, a human climbed onto the broken communications mast and looked across the devastated valley. Her name was Chief Engineer Mara Venn. She was 46 years old, compactly built, with silver beginning to show in her dark hair. Her official record described her as a specialist in hazardous infrastructure, planetary recovery, and emergency fabrication. Before joining the trial, she had spent 16 years rebuilding settlements after earthquakes, reactor failures, volcanic eruptions, and orbital bombardments. Soreth considered that resume impressive by human standards. The Crucible had destroyed civilizations older than her entire species. Mara raised one hand and made a circling motion. The humans gathered around her. "Status," she said. Commander Elias Ward stepped out of the dust with blood running from a shallow cut above his left eye. "Shelter 4 is gone. No fatalities. Dr. Solano has 3 fractures and 1 concussion. Generator housing is intact, but the main coolant line is buried." "Food stores?" Mara asked. Quartermaster Nadia Okafor checked the damaged cargo platforms. 40% accessible. Another 30% under the slide. Water recycler survived. "Atmosphere processors," Mara continued. "Operational," Technician Haruto Vale replied. "Intake filters are ruined, but the internal units are clean. Mara looked up at the artificial sky. The dust layer was already reducing solar exposure. Temperatures would begin falling within minutes. Then we stopped treating this as a camp, she said. It is a construction site now. No one argued. The humans split into teams. Some dug toward the fusion generator. Others dismantled the collapsed mast. Two began cutting the crushed shelter into usable panels. Dr. Isabel Solano turned the least damaged module into a medical station, set her own fractured wrist, and returned to work before the first hour had passed. Soreth watched the activity with growing interest. "They are suppressing distress behavior," said observer Talvek from the Ossian League. "No," replied curator Yalara, a pale, many-eyed scholar from the Archives of Life. "Their heart rates are elevated, but not abnormally. They are coordinating through practiced emergency doctrine." Soreth remained still. The first mountain was not the trial, it was merely the opening statement. He activated the next sequence. Deep beneath the valley, machinery the size of cities awakened. Artificial fault lines shifted, reservoirs opened, atmospheric injectors released dense clouds across the northern horizon. Above the human camp, the temperature fell by 20 degrees. Lightning began to form inside the dust. The Crucible Authority had not been created by Soreth's people, it had been discovered. 6,000 years earlier, the first explorers of the Valari Ascendancy had found the structure orbiting an uninhabited world. The station contained no crew, no historical record, and no explanation for its builders. It held only a sequence of environments and a governing intelligence with a single function: test those who seek passage. The Valari had survived the Crucible at terrible cost. Of the original 300 candidates, only 9 had emerged. Their endurance became the foundation of Valari political doctrine. Civilization, they taught, was a shell constructed around weakness. Technology softened temperature, agriculture softened hunger, medicine softened disease, fleets softened fear. Strip those protections away, and every intelligent species returned to the fragile animal from which it had evolved. The Crucible existed to reveal that animal. During the centuries that followed, the Valari transformed the station into a galactic institution. Tests became less lethal, observation improved, and emergency extraction systems were added. Yet the principle remained sacred. A species that could not endure controlled catastrophe could not be trusted with galactic responsibility. Humanity had objected to the philosophy from the beginning. Ambassador Helena Rios had called the trial an elaborate misunderstanding of survival. She had argued that endurance was not the same as isolation, that civilizations existed precisely because individuals were not meant to face disaster alone. Soreth had interpreted the objection as fear. Every species criticized the Crucible before entering it. Most became quieter afterward. The human delegation had surprised him by accepting. They requested only 3 conditions. Their team would include civilians as well as military personnel. They would bring their own standard colonial equipment, and they would be allowed to choose one chief engineer. The authority agreed. The trial world, designated Crucible Sphere 7, had been prepared for 14 months. Its environment was not natural. Mountain ranges could be raised or broken, rivers could be redirected, atmospheric composition could be changed by percentages within hours. Predatory organisms could be released from sealed habitats. Magnetic fields, radiation levels, humidity, and gravity could all be adjusted. The human team had been informed that the trial would last 10 days. They had not been told what they would face. Soreth had selected the Catastrophic Convergence Protocol, an infamous sequence attempted only 6 times in recorded history. No species had completed it. The protocol combined environmental disasters rather than presenting them separately. Geological instability triggered atmospheric collapse. Atmospheric collapse damaged infrastructure. Infrastructure failure created shortages. Shortages forced migration. Migration drove candidates into biologically hostile territory. A species might solve one crisis. The convergence ensured the solution became the cause of another. Soreth expected the humans to perform well during the opening hours. Their homeworld had unusual weather, aggressive microorganisms, and active geology. They might even survive the first day, but Earth remained a sheltered planet by Crucible standards. Its gravity did not change. Its oceans did not become acidic overnight. Its mountains did not actively hunt those who crossed them. The humans had evolved amid danger, but danger followed rules. The crucible did not. 4 hours after the avalanche, the storm reached the valley. Wind struck at 200 kilometers per hour. Hailstones larger than human fists shattered against the newly assembled shelter wall. Lightning crossed the black clouds in continuous white veins. By then, the human camp no longer resembled the camp that had been buried. Mara Ven had ordered the surviving modules disassembled and relocated against the exposed foundation of the crushed shelter. The avalanche had packed stone tightly around the structure, creating a barrier on 3 sides. Steel panels from the communications mast reinforced the fourth. The humans redirected waste heat from the fusion generator through channels cut beneath the floor. The result was ugly, cramped, and stable. Soreth reviewed the thermal readings. They built into the debris, he said. Curator Yalara adjusted one of her displays. They are using the disaster as structural reinforcement. The storm will flood the foundation. They have excavated drainage trenches. The trenches will freeze during the temperature drop. They have routed generator heat through them. Soreth turned toward her. How long did they require to calculate that? Yalara focused 3 of her eyes on the human camp. They did not calculate it through the central computer. Engineer Ven identified the sequence while walking through the site. On the planet below, rain became ice. Mara stood inside the generator trench with Haruto Vale and mechanical specialist Thomas Ilian. Water ran over their boots. Wind screamed through gaps in the shelter wall. Haruto examined the patched coolant line. Pressure is holding at 62%. We need 80, Mara said. The original coupling is cracked. Then it is not a coupling anymore. It is raw material. Thomas lifted a section of the ruined communications mast. Different alloy. Close enough after we heat it. Haruto looked at the lightning striking the ridge. With what furnace? Mara pointed toward the damaged atmospheric purifier. Its induction coil. That coil regulates oxygen flow. Not while we are outside. Haruto stared at her for a moment, then smiled despite himself. Right, he said. I will start taking it apart. The crucible intelligence increased the wind. The humans shortened their exterior safety lines. It reduced the temperature. They moved the medical station closer to the generator. It contaminated the river with metallic salts. Nadia Okafor activated emergency condensers and began collecting water from the storm. For every environmental change, the humans produced an answer. Few answers were elegant. None resembled the intended use of their equipment. They dismantled tools to repair other tools. They used broken machinery as building material. They melted ice for coolant, burned damaged insulation for carbon filters, and converted empty food containers into chemical separators. By the end of the first day, 3 candidates from the observing civilizations had requested technical copies of the human procedures. Soreth denied them. This was not a demonstration. It was a test. At the beginning of the second day, the valley floor split open. A fracture appeared 700 meters from the human shelter and widened with astonishing speed. The river vanished into it. Steam erupted from the depths. Sensors detected rising concentrations of sulfur dioxide and hydrogen sulfide. The human alarm sounded. Commander Ward studied the readings and turned to Mara. We have 14 minutes before the gas reaches us. Mara was already pulling the air intake assembly from the shelter wall. Seal every module. Rebreathers for the exterior crews. Move the condensers uphill. The ridge is unstable, Ward warned. So is the valley. Dr. Solano approached with her injured arm secured against her chest. Our oxygen reserve lasts 6 hours with everyone inside. We will not use it for 6 hours, Mara replied. The atmospheric system cannot filter this concentration. It could not filter this concentration yesterday. Solano glanced at the open purifier housing. What did you do to it? Improved its education. Mara removed 2 ceramic plates from the system and handed them to Haruto. Grind these. Mix the powder with the carbon ash and pack it between the fabric layers. That might bind the sulfur compounds, Haruto said. It will bind enough. Enough for what? Mara looked toward the fracture. Enough for us to go outside and close the vent. In the observation chamber, Arbiter Soreth rose halfway from his cradle. Close the vent, he repeated. The geological fracture extended nearly 4 kilometers below the surface. It had been designed to remain active for 30 hours. The humans had no drilling equipment, no industrial sealant, and no heavy transport. They did possess 20 kilograms of emergency thermite, a set of excavation charges, and a fusion generator capable of producing far more electrical power than their damaged camp could safely use. Mara then began drawing in the dirt. Her plan involved collapsing one side of the fracture, melting the resulting stone into a partial seal, and using controlled electrical discharge to fuse the surface layer. The operation would not stop the underground event. It did not need to. It only had to redirect the gas toward an unoccupied basin east of the valley. Commander Ward studied the drawing. "How certain are you that the rock will fall where I want it?" Mara asked. "Yes, about 60%. And the electrical discharge? 40. Ward folded his arms. "Combined probability? Do not combine probabilities that way. I am the commander. I can combine them however I like. Then the number is unhelpful." Ward looked at the approaching gas cloud. "Do you have a better plan?" Mara stood and handed him a rebreather. "Yes. We do it quickly." 11 humans left the shelter. They crossed the unstable slope while the atmosphere turned poisonous around them. Tomas and Nadia placed excavation charges inside cracks identified by Mara. Haruto stretched conductive cable across the rock. Commander Ward supervised from the ridge, calling movement warnings whenever the ground shifted. The first detonation failed. Half the slope collapsed, but the largest section remained upright. Soreth exhaled slowly. The convergence had finally moved beyond them. Then Mara climbed onto the fractured ledge, carrying the salvaged induction coil. Ward shouted for her to return. She waved him back. The engineer wedged the coil into a narrow seam, connected it to the fusion generator through 600 meters of cable, and ordered Haruto to send a 3-second overload. The coil was never designed to survive such power. It became white-hot instantly. The trapped water inside the seam flashed into steam. Pressure tore through the weakened stone. The remaining cliff face broke along a line Mara had identified 20 minutes earlier. Millions of kilograms of rock fell into the fracture. The impact threw Mara from the ledge. Her safety line caught her above the opening. Ward and Tomas dragged her back as sulfurous steam erupted around them. Then Haruto activated the second stage. Electrical current flowed through the conductive cable. The broken stone glowed red. Edges softened, joined, and hardened into an uneven cap. Gas pressure rose below it, searched for escape, and burst from the eastern basin exactly as Mara had predicted. Inside the observation chamber, alarms registered an unauthorized modification to the programmed environment. Curator Yalara made a sound her species used when confronted with something beautiful. "They altered the trial," she said. Soreth stared at the cooling fracture. Candidates were supposed to survive environments. They were not supposed to repair them. On the third day, the Crucible Authority held an emergency review. Some observers demanded the trial be suspended. The humans had interfered with the mechanisms of Sphere 7, potentially violating ancient rules. Soreth rejected the complaint. The candidates had not entered restricted systems. They had not received outside support. They had used only the materials available within the trial zone. Their success was legitimate. Privately, he found it intolerable. The Crucible did not measure creativity alone. Every tested species possessed intelligence. The station measured the boundary beyond which intelligence failed. Soreth had not yet found the human boundary. He ordered the biological phase to begin. Across the northern plateau, containment fields dropped. Creatures emerged from underground habitats. They were called Variks, 6-limbed predators engineered from genetic lineages discovered on 17 worlds. Each stood nearly 3 meters high at the shoulder. Their armored hides resisted thermal weapons. Their sensory organs detected electrical activity from kilometers away. The Variks had been designed to hunt technology. They ignored ordinary animals and moved toward active power systems. There were 12 of them. The human camp was the only electrical source in the valley. Commander Ward saw the signals first. "Multiple contacts," he said. "Northern approach. Fast." Mara examined the motion display. "How fast?" "They will reach us in 28 minutes. Can we shut down the generator? Not without losing atmosphere control. Then they are coming here. The humans gathered inside the reinforced shelter. They possessed rifles, but ammunition had been limited by the authority. The trial was not intended to become a military contest. Most species attempted to defend their camps, exhausted their weapons, and were forced to flee. Ward knew the pattern. "We cannot hold this position against 12 armored targets," he said. Biologist Kenji Rao studied the limited scans. "They are tracking electrical output, not body heat." Mara looked toward the fusion generator. Ward recognized the expression on her face. "No," he said. "I have not said anything. You are looking at the generator like you plan to introduce it to the wildlife. The Variks want electrical signals." "We need the generator. We need part of the generator," Mara replied. She dismantled the secondary power distribution system. Within 12 minutes, the humans had assembled 4 crude signal emitters from spare wiring, heater elements, battery cells, and pieces of the ruined communications mast. Each produced an electrical pattern similar to the camp, though far weaker. Nadia examined the devices. "They will follow these?" Kenji shook his head. "Not for long. The predators will realize they are false targets." "How long is not long?" "Perhaps 5 minutes." Mara loaded the emitters onto small emergency drones. 5 minutes is generous. The drones launched in 4 directions. The approaching Variks changed course. 8 pursued the false signals. 4 continued toward the camp. Ward positioned the armed candidates along the shelter wall. Then Kenji noticed something unexpected. The Variks did not move independently. Each creature adjusted its path based on the others, maintaining distances and angles even while pursuing separate targets. "They are coordinated," he said. "Hive intelligence?" asked Dr. Solano. "No. Pack mathematics. Each animal predicts the movement of the others." Mara watched the tactical screen. "Then we make their predictions wrong." She reprogrammed the drones. Instead of fleeing, the emitters began circling the valley. Their paths crossed and separated at irregular intervals. The Variks adjusted repeatedly. 2 collided. A third leaped across the fracture and landed in unstable ash. The 4 approaching the camp slowed. Their formation depended on the positions of the others. With the pack scattered, their predictive behavior became unreliable. Kenji stared at the display. "They are confused." Ward lowered his rifle slightly. "Can we keep them confused?" Mara adjusted another route. "I have managed procurement departments. These animals are straightforward." For 3 hours, the humans guided the Variks across the trial zone. They did not kill the creatures. They herded them. Signal emitters drew the predators toward natural barriers. Drones led them into isolated basins. The humans then constructed passive electrical loops around the basin entrances, producing patterns the Variks interpreted as the movement of larger rival packs. By sunset, all 12 predators had settled inside separate territories. Kenji proposed leaving them there. Mara agreed and ordered food scraps placed beyond the containment lines. Soreth watched one of the Variks curl beneath a rock shelf while a human drone deposited water nearby. The predators had been introduced to force migration. The humans had domesticated the problem. That evening, Soreth descended to Sphere 7. Direct contact with candidates during an active trial was forbidden except during medical extraction. He classified the visit as an equipment inspection. Mara Ven found him beside the altered atmospheric purifier. The Valari arbiter stood more than 2 meters tall, his body supported by 4 narrow legs. Dark ceremonial plates covered his torso, and silver sensory membranes extended from his shoulders like folded wings. Mara wiped grease from her hands. "You must be Arbiter Soreth," she said. "You recognize me. Your image was in the briefing packet." Soreth looked around the shelter. Every surface had been altered. Medical equipment shared power with heating systems. Storage containers had become structural supports. A section of Variks tracking mesh now served as an exterior lightning conductor. "Your equipment no longer conforms to its certified design," he said. "That is generally what happens to equipment after a mountain falls on it. You have damaged trial infrastructure." "The trial infrastructure damaged our camp first." Soreth studied her face. She did not appear triumphant. She looked tired, bruised, and mildly distracted. "Why did you accept this trial?" he asked. Mara returned to the purifier. "Your authority required it. Humanity could have remained an associate civilization. We could have. You considered that unacceptable." Mara tightened a fastener. "We considered it inefficient." The answer disturbed him more than pride would have. "The Crucible is the oldest measure of species resilience in the Concord," Soreth said. "Its environments have humbled empires spanning hundreds of systems. I read the history. Then you understand what it represents." Mara paused. "I understand what you believe it represents." Soreth's shoulder membranes unfolded slightly. "Explain the distinction." She considered him for a moment. "You think survival is what remains after comfort, infrastructure, and cooperation are removed. Humans think those things are how survival works. The Crucible removes artificial protections. There is nothing artificial about cooperation. Technology is not biology. A dam built by small animals is still part of their survival strategy. A nest is technology. A pack is infrastructure. You keep stripping away everything intelligent species create, then acting surprised when they perform worse without it. The trial reveals the individual beneath civilization." Mara shook her head. "There is no individual beneath civilization. Not in the way you mean. Every person here carries thousands of years of other people with them. Metallurgy, medicine, mathematics, stories about storms. Mistakes made by workers who died before we were born. You can cut our communications, but you cannot remove what humanity already taught us." Soreth moved closer. "And when all stored knowledge fails, then we learn something new. When tools fail, we make tools. When the environment becomes impossible," Mara glanced toward the sealed fracture. "We change the environment." Soreth had heard confidence from hundreds of candidates. This was different. Mara spoke as though she were explaining gravity. He returned to orbit and authorized the fourth phase. The trial intelligence objected. Catastrophic convergence had already exceeded recommended energy expenditure. Geological systems were unstable, atmospheric processors had been altered, and biological assets were no longer following expected behavior. Soreth overrode the warning. He needed to find the boundary. On the fourth morning, the sun disappeared. Orbital shutters moved between Sphere 7 and its star. Darkness covered the trial continent. Temperature dropped rapidly. At the same time, the Crucible increased local gravity from standard human levels to 1.6. The candidates fell where they stood. Bones strained, hearts labored. Every movement demanded greater effort. The fusion generator supports buckled under their own weight. One shelter wall collapsed inward. Then the rain began. Not water. The atmosphere produced a dense hydrocarbon fluid that coated surfaces, penetrated seals, and reacted with the human stored polymers. Suit joints stiffened, cables softened, filters dissolved. The combined assault was precise. Darkness removed solar reference and heat. Gravity reduced mobility. Chemical rain attacked synthetic equipment. The humans had never encountered all three conditions together. For the first time, Mara Ven did not immediately issue orders. She lay on one knee beneath the shelter frame, struggling to breathe against the increased weight of her own chest. Around her, the team moved slowly. Dr. Solano crawled toward a candidate pinned beneath a support beam. Ward and Tomas lifted it only a few centimeters before their strength failed. The observation chamber was silent. The Crucible intelligence calculated a 91% probability of surrender. Soreth felt relief. Not pleasure, relief. The humans had a boundary after all. On the planet, Mara forced herself upright. She crossed the shelter in short, deliberate steps and crouched beside the damaged fusion generator. The outer seals were beginning to dissolve. Haruto joined her. "The coolant system will fail within 40 minutes, he said. "Can we move the generator underground?" "Not at this gravity. Can we lower it?" Haruto looked at the floor. "The avalanche void," he said. Beneath the original shelter, crushed structural panels had created pockets inside the packed stone. The humans had used some as storage chambers. Mara called Commander Ward. "We need a shaft beneath the generator." "With what equipment?" "Gravity will do most of the work. They cut through the floor. The generator began sinking as stone was removed beneath it. Instead of lifting the machine, they allowed its increased weight to carry it downward. Guide rails made from shelter supports controlled the descent. Chemical rain continued entering through damaged seams. Kenji collected a sample. It reacts with processed polymers, he reported. Natural fibers remained stable. The humans opened their medical stores. Bandages, plant-based fabrics, and compressed cellulose insulation replaced dissolving synthetic seals. Animal-derived lubricants from food supplies protected mechanical joints. Ceramic dining surfaces became electrical barriers. Nadia examined the shrinking inventory. We are repairing a fusion reactor with tableware. Mara secured a ceramic plate over an exposed junction. It is excellent tableware. Darkness deepened. The temperature fell below -40. The humans could no longer heat the entire shelter. They abandoned most of it and moved into the underground void around the generator. The cramped chamber trapped warmth. Stone supported the increased gravity better than artificial structures. Their usable world shrank to a space 20 meters long and 6 meters high. 24 humans lived there. They slept in shifts because there was not enough room for everyone to lie down. They rationed oxygen. They spoke quietly to conserve strength. For 17 hours, the observation chamber saw almost no movement. Then Mara began planning again. The gravity projectors were somewhere below the valley, she reasoned. The crucible generated environmental changes through physical mechanisms. Physical mechanisms produced waste heat, magnetic fields, vibration, or radiation. Haruto reviewed their sensor logs. There is a repeating magnetic pulse beneath us. Depth, 200 meters, perhaps more. Could we reach it? Not by digging. Mara looked at the sealed geological fracture. The vent descended 4 kilometers. Ward understood first. Absolutely not, he said. We do not need to descend 4 kilometers. You are proposing entering a volcanic fracture during toxic rain and increased gravity. I am proposing using an existing access route. It is not an access route. Everything is an access route if it reaches the place you need to go. Ward looked around the underground chamber. The team was exhausted. Several candidates showed signs of cardiac stress. Their oxygen reserve was decreasing. What happens when we find the projector, he asked. We ask it to stop. And if it refuses? Mara picked up the induction coil housing, now reshaped into a heavy cutting tool. We ask more clearly. 6 humans entered the fracture. They wore suits reinforced with natural fiber wraps and ceramic panels. Increased gravity made every descent dangerous. The chemical rain had turned the upper rock slick, but deeper inside the fissure the temperature rose. Mara led them through passages created by the earlier collapse. Haruto carried a magnetic scanner. Ward managed the safety lines. Nadia, Tomas, and geologist Priya Sato followed with tools and power cells. At a depth of 180 meters, they found a wall that did not belong to the mountain. It was smooth, black, and warm. Priya cleared stone from its surface. Trial infrastructure, she said. Haruto traced the magnetic signal. The pulse is coming from behind it. Mara examined the wall. No door was visible. She began tapping the surface with a metal rod, listening to the sound. Ward leaned against the stone, breathing heavily. Please tell me you are not about to use explosives inside the mountain. Not explosives. That is not reassuring. Mara marked 3 points on the wall. They placed thermal charges designed for emergency hull repair. The charges heated narrow circles rather than detonating. Ancient material softened under concentrated energy. Tomas drove ceramic wedges into the weakened sections. The wall cracked. Behind it waited a chamber filled with machinery. Columns of dark metal descended beyond the range of their lights. Blue energy moved between suspended rings. The gravity projector was not a single device, but a network extending beneath the continent. Haruto stared at the readings. We cannot disable this. Mara nodded. Correct. Ward looked at her. That sounded dangerously calm. We do not need to disable it. She pointed to the nearest energy ring. We need to unbalance it. The Crucible intelligence detected the intrusion 30 seconds later. Warning symbols filled the observation chamber. Candidates have breached environmental control zone, it announced. Soreth stood. How? They entered through geological infrastructure modified during the second phase. Seal the breach. Unable. Local maintenance barriers were damaged by programmed tectonic activity. Soreth watched the human icons moving among the gravity systems. Terminate the field. The command was denied. Manual safety interlocks are inaccessible while candidates occupy the projector chamber. For the first time in 6,000 years, the trial had trapped itself. Mara did not understand the ancient control language, but she understood machines. Energy entered the projector through 12 primary conduits. Each ring distributed the load across a magnetic lattice. The design was complex, but the physical principles were not. Machines required balance. Human engineers had spent centuries exploiting imbalance. Mara attached 3 power cells to the outer ring. Haruto reviewed her connections. This will create harmonic interference. Exactly. It could rupture the ring. Not if we vary the timing. You want to pulse the cells manually? The control software will compensate for a stable pattern. We will not give it one. The 6 humans took positions around the chamber. Mara counted through a sequence based on prime numbers. Each pulse distorted the local field. The projector corrected. The next pulse arrived at a different interval. The correction systems began chasing contradictions through the network. On the surface, gravity fluctuated. 1.6 became 1.4, then 1.7, then 1.2. The humans in the shelter held onto the walls. Inside the projector chamber, alarms sounded. Soreth ordered the trial intelligence to isolate the affected ring. It cannot, the intelligence replied. Load redistribution would destabilize adjacent sectors, then shut down the network. Manual shutdown remains unavailable. Soreth looked toward Curator Yalara. She had turned all of her eyes toward him. You wanted their boundary, she said. Below, Mara sent the final pulse. The projector network protected itself. Every gravity ring beneath the valley shut down simultaneously. For 3 seconds, there was no gravity at all. Humans, stones, tools, and droplets of chemical rain rose from the ground. Then Sphere 7 returned to its natural gravitational level. Across the underground chamber, Mara drifted downward and landed on unsteady legs. Haruto looked at the silent machinery. We asked clearly, he said. The orbital shutters reopened 2 hours later. Soreth did not order it. The Crucible intelligence did. Sphere 7 had entered a system recovery state. Environmental programs were suspended, while the station recalibrated damaged infrastructure. Sunlight returned to the valley. Chemical rain stopped. Temperature rose. The remaining trial creatures retreated to their habitats. For the first time in 4 days, the human team stood beneath a clear sky. They did not celebrate, they slept. The Crucible Authority convened an emergency tribunal. 31 civilizations argued for 12 hours. Some claimed humanity had invalidated the trial by attacking its mechanisms. Others insisted that no rule prohibited environmental modification. Several demanded the catastrophic convergence protocol be permanently abolished. Soreth remained silent through most of the debate. He watched recordings. Mara sealing the fracture. Mara redirecting the predators. Mara lowering the generator rather than lifting it. Mara entering the mountain and teaching an ancient machine to protect itself from her. Every action had violated an assumption. Not a rule, an assumption. The Crucible assumed candidates would preserve equipment. Humans dismantled it. The Crucible assumed hazards would be endured or avoided. Humans redirected them. The Crucible assumed survival meant maintaining the conditions of life. Humans changed those conditions. On the 5th day, the system completed its recovery. Sphere 7 was ready to resume. Soreth returned to the observation chamber. The human camp had emerged from underground. Candidates repaired suits, checked medical supplies, and examined the altered landscape. Mara stood beside the fusion generator, now mounted inside a stone-lined pit. Commander Ward approached her. The Authority has not ended the trial, he said. I noticed. How much equipment do we have left? Mara considered the question. 1 functional generator, 2 drones, 4 rifles, 9 power cells, several kilometers of wire, half an atmospheric purifier, a useful quantity of ceramic tableware. Food, 3 days. Water, indefinite, if the condensers keep working. Ward looked toward the sky. What do you think comes next? Mara shrugged. Something educational. In orbit, Soreth authorized the final sequence. Curator Yalara moved beside him. The candidates have already exceeded every completion standard. The protocol has not finished. No species has reached this stage. Then the result will be valuable. What are you trying to prove, Arbiter? Soreth did not answer. The final stage of catastrophic convergence was called the null cycle. It had been designed by the Crucible builders and never modified by the Valari. The system removed not one environmental support but nearly all of them. Atmospheric oxygen would decline. Surface water would retreat underground. Temperature would swing between extreme heat and cold. Electromagnetic interference would disable unshielded electronics. The candidate zone would become incapable of supporting complex life within 36 hours. Extraction remained available. Surrender was expected. No species had ever needed to be removed by force. Soreth initiated the cycle. Across Sphere 7, the air began to thin. The human camp detected the change within seconds. Dr. Solano studied the atmospheric readings. Oxygen is falling by 0.3% every 10 minutes. Can the purifier compensate? Ward asked. Haruto shook his head. It does not create oxygen. It only separates and circulates what exists. Water levels? Nadia checked the wells. Dropping. Mara looked across the valley. Vegetation was already beginning to close its leaves. Small animals fled toward lower ground. The sky shimmered with electromagnetic interference. The authority transmitted a formal message. The final stage has begun. Soreth announced through the emergency receiver. Extraction is available at any time. State your surrender and the trial will end. Ward looked at the others. No one spoke. He turned to Mara. Options? She studied the environmental display. How quickly can the fusion generator be moved? It cannot, Haruto said. Not intact. Haruto followed her gaze toward the damaged atmospheric purifier, then toward the condensers, then toward the sealed fracture, the underground gravity chamber, and the abandoned Varix habitats. His expression changed. Mara, he said slowly, what are you thinking? The entire trial is machinery. Yes, machinery has resources. Ward stepped closer. Explain. Mara knelt and drew a circle in the dust. The atmosphere is losing oxygen because the station is removing or binding it. Water is going somewhere. Heat is being transferred, not destroyed. Every crisis they created required equipment powerful enough to reshape a continent. She drew lines through the circle. We have been treating each system as a threat. Haruto crouched beside her. You want to connect them. I want to build a habitat. Ward looked around the ruined valley. Here? Mara shook her head. Everywhere. The plan spread through the human team with astonishing speed. They would not preserve the camp. They would convert the trial zone. The geological fracture provided heat and underground access. The disabled gravity chamber provided shielding and enormous cavities. The atmospheric machinery contained gases, compressors, filters, and storage tanks. The Varix habitats contained sealed ecosystems designed to sustain large predators for years. The humans did not need to create life support from nothing. They only needed to connect systems the Crucible had kept separate. Teams entered the mountain again. Priya mapped underground channels. Nadia located reservoirs where the missing water was being stored. Kenji studied the predator habitats and found oxygen-producing microorganisms maintained for ecological balance. Haruto began rerouting power from the fusion generator into abandoned control conduits. Dr. Solano supervised work rotations as oxygen levels fell. Commander Ward coordinated every movement through wired signals that remained functional despite electromagnetic interference. Mara stood at the center of it all. For 20 hours, she barely rested. The humans opened a channel between the underground reservoir and the gravity chamber. They redirected geothermal steam through ancient maintenance shafts. They transplanted dense mats of oxygen-producing organisms into heated pools. They constructed airlocks from shelter panels and sealed them with natural fibers and ceramic resin. The Crucible Intelligence attempted to compensate. It closed one reservoir, humans opened another. It increased heat on the surface. Humans moved deeper underground. It reduced oxygen faster. The biological pools expanded production. Soreth watched the struggle in silence. This was no longer a survival trial. It was a contest between a planetary machine and 24 exhausted humans. The machine possessed continent-sized systems, ancient intelligence, and nearly unlimited power. The humans possessed broken tools and one engineer who refused to accept the intended use of anything. At hour 26, atmospheric oxygen fell below the level required for unassisted human activity. The team moved underground. At hour 30, surface water vanished. Their reservoir began circulating. At hour 32, temperature above the valley exceeded 80 degrees. The underground habitat remained stable. At hour 34, the Crucible Intelligence announced that complex life could no longer survive in the candidate zone. Then its sensors detected 24 human life signs. Stable. Soreth stared at the readings. Where are they receiving oxygen? Curator Yalara displayed the biological pools. They created a closed atmospheric loop. The null cycle is still removing oxygen. Only from the surface. Their habitat is connected to predator ecosystem reserves beyond the candidate boundary. That is prohibited. The habitats are part of Sphere 7. The candidates did not leave the trial zone. They accessed them through subsurface maintenance channels. Soreth activated direct communication. "Engineer Venn," he said, "respond." A pause followed. Then Mara's voice emerged through heavy static. "Arbiter Soreth, we are occupied. The null cycle has rendered your assigned zone uninhabitable. We noticed. You have connected to systems outside the intended environment." Mara coughed, then answered. "Your mountain fell outside its intended location. We adapted. The trial requires survival within the conditions provided. These are the conditions provided. You are using the Crucible against itself." "No," Mara said. "We are using it to keep people alive. That appears to be what survival equipment is for." Soreth looked at the tribunal representatives. They were all listening. "The final stage will continue," he warned. "How long?" "Until you surrender or become unable to proceed." Mara was silent for several seconds. Then she asked for a complete description of the completion standard. Soreth hesitated. No candidate had ever asked that question during the null cycle. "The standard is continued survival without external assistance." "For how long?" The Crucible Intelligence answered through the channel. "The null cycle has no fixed duration. Historical projection assumed candidate failure within 36 hours. Mara spoke to someone away from the transmitter. Her words were indistinct. Then she returned. "We need clarification," she said. "On what matter? When does the difficult part start?" No one in the observation chamber moved. The words were not delivered with mockery. That made them worse. Mara sounded genuinely concerned that she had misunderstood the trial. Soreth's shoulder membranes folded tight against his body. "The difficult part?" he repeated. "Yes. We have stabilized air, water, power, temperature, and food production. The habitat is uncomfortable, but the main engineering problems are solved. If the trial has another phase, we need to budget materials." Curator Yalara lowered herself slowly into a resting posture. Several observers produced sounds of disbelief. One began laughing. Not a human laugh, but the rapid harmonic pulse used by the Pelosian species when logic failed so completely that emotion became the only available response. Soreth shut down the channel. For 6,000 years, the Crucible had taught civilizations that survival meant discovering the limit of their strength. Humanity had entered its deadliest trial and begun managing resources for the next phase. The authority ordered a complete sensor review. The findings arrived 1 hour later. The human habitat was not merely stable, it was expanding. Mara had designed modular chambers along the underground network. The oxygen pools produced surplus capacity. Geothermal systems generated more heat than required. Water recovery exceeded daily consumption. The humans had begun cultivating edible fungal cultures from their emergency medical supplies and the Varix ecosystem. Haruto Val had restored communication between 3 environmental control sectors. Nadia Okafor had cataloged enough stored water to support 200 people. Kenji Rao had established non-aggressive contact with one of the Varix packs, which now occupied a warm tunnel near the habitat and deterred smaller trial organisms. Dr. Solano had converted an ancient maintenance room into a clinic. Commander Ward had marked evacuation routes capable of sheltering future candidates. They were not simply surviving, they were preparing for others. Soreth reopened communication. Mara answered from a chamber lit by improvised lamps. Her face was tired, her hair unwashed, and one side of her survival suit had been patched with woven medical fabric. "Why are you expanding the habitat?" Soreth asked. "Redundancy. The current team does not require this much capacity. The next team might. There will be no next team in your habitat." Mara looked past the transmitter toward humans carrying pipes through a newly opened passage. Then that would be wasteful. Soreth felt something inside his doctrine begin to fracture. The Crucible had always measured the candidate species alone. Every team entered separately. Every civilization suffered separately. Lessons were recorded, but solutions were erased, so the next candidates faced an unaltered trial. Humans did not see an unaltered trial. They saw an abandoned disaster site. They were building for strangers they had never met. "Why would you help future candidates?" Soreth asked. "Their performance could reduce the distinction of your own achievement." Mara frowned. "This is not a competition. It determines galactic standing. We already have standing. You are not a full member of the Concord. That is paperwork. I mean, we are standing right now because thousands of people built systems before us. Leaving the next group to start from nothing would be ridiculous. They are not human." Mara's expression remained unchanged. "They will still need air." The answer crossed the chamber like a pressure wave. Curator Yalara turned toward Soreth. "There is your result," she said. The Arbiter looked at the ancient station. He understood at last that he had asked the wrong question. The Crucible was designed to discover what remained when civilization was stripped away. Humanity had revealed that civilization could not be stripped away from them. Not completely. It existed in memory, habit, instinct, and obligation. It existed in the engineer who saw wreckage and imagined shelter. It existed in the doctor who set her own broken wrist before treating others. It existed in the commander who trusted expertise, the biologist who fed predators, and the exhausted team that used its first stable hours to prepare room for strangers. The station could remove comfort. It could remove tools. It could remove sunlight, water, gravity, and air. It could not remove the human decision to build again. Soreth ended the null cycle. Across Sphere 7, environmental systems returned to normal. Oxygen flowed back into the atmosphere. Water rose through empty riverbeds. Temperatures stabilized. The electromagnetic storm faded. The humans emerged from the mountains 6 hours later. 24 figures stood beneath the restored sky. They were thinner, bruised, and exhausted. Their original camp had ceased to exist. Their equipment had been cut apart and distributed across kilometers of underground infrastructure. Behind them, warm air rose from the entrance to the habitat they had built. Arbiter Soreth descended to the valley with the full tribunal. Mara met him beside the sealed fracture. The Valari carried the ceremonial seal of the Crucible Authority, an object granted only to civilizations that completed the trial. Soreth held it out. "Humanity has satisfied the survival standard of the Concord." Mara accepted the seal. "Thank you." The simplicity of her reply unsettled him. "You do not appear surprised. We expected to survive. No civilization expected the catastrophic convergence protocol. We did not expect the details." "Then what did you expect?" Mara looked across the valley. "A problem." Soreth followed her gaze. The mountain remained broken. The river followed a new course. The predators occupied territories the Crucible had never assigned them. Beneath the surface, human machinery and ancient systems worked together to support a living habitat. "You changed Sphere 7 permanently," he said. It can be restored. Do you recommend that? Mara considered the question. No. Why? Because the next species should know survival does not have to mean starting alone. 3 months later, the Concord of Civilizations voted to suspend the old Crucible doctrine. The station was not destroyed. Humanity did not demand that. Instead, Sphere 7 became the first interstellar disaster academy. Species from across the Concord sent engineers, medics, pilots, farmers, and emergency coordinators to train there together. Mara Venn directed its reconstruction. She refused the title of arbiter and accepted chief engineer instead. The underground habitat became permanent. Its first expansion housed 400 trainees. The second connected the valley to the northern plateau. Within 10 years, the academy contained cities beneath 3 mountain ranges and emergency ecosystems capable of sustaining 30,000 lives. The Variks remained. Kenji Rao argued successfully that they had become part of the local environment. They were given protected territories and became the Academy's unofficial symbol. Arbiter Soreth resigned from the Crucible Authority. He did not leave public service. He became the first Valari instructor at the Academy, teaching the history of the trial and the assumptions that had shaped it. His opening lecture always included the same account. He described the avalanche. He described the toxic fracture, the chemical rain, the crushing gravity, and the dying atmosphere. Then he described a tired human engineer asking when the difficult part would start. Students often laughed. Soreth never did. He understood the question for what it had truly been. Not arrogance, not defiance, readiness. For 6,000 years, the galaxy had believed survival was the final refuge of the strong. Humanity revealed something older and greater. Survival was a bridge built in darkness, a shelter raised from ruins, a hand reaching backward for those who had fallen and forward for those who had not yet arrived. And wherever the universe broke the ground beneath them, humans would kneel among the shattered pieces, choose the ones that still had value, and begin building a road.